Did everybody have a chance to go over this yet, or is this not out there yet?
It's not out there yet. It was just kind of within the group. Let me
Sorry about
post it
that.
up real quick. Control.
Huh, they call it first-person vision. I've always thought it as first-person view.
Yeah, it seems like
I
the
guess
FAA changed up a few things.
this operation word, I guess, is interchangeable with like piloting or flying or some other words that we could use to disseminate it better.
Okay. Yes, you're talking about first-person vision aircraft operation?
Exactly. Like we need a
Okay,
more like, I don't know if we're talking to third graders version of it, title.
sure. I was just trying to reflect what the FAA used, and a lot of this actually comes from 107.
No, that's perfect because that's what we
Trying,
wanted to pluck out, right? That's what we were all talking about.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, we should just go through this. We should Cujo, are you editing this already or are you taking this and transposing it?
I plan on it. I wanted to kind of cover it first, but I'm in the document right now, so I can make edits on the fly or drop notes in there.
So first scan of it, like I want to take us a step back or two and look at it like do we have all the terms that people are going to ask about? Right? That's the major question. First, like what terms are people like what if let me use the phrase, a noob goes into a forum and he sees a bunch of acronyms, what are the first few that he's going to want to know like what they mean?
Oh, there's going to be a ton more than this. I've been doing 14-hour days for almost a week that ended yesterday.
Oh my
So I'm just
gosh.
now getting on this. No, it's just the way the work schedule piled up, and then I've got a few days off.
So I think a
So
couple
this
of
is
things that we I mean, even beyond just these, I mean, do we want to define, even at a more basic level, like, ESC, FC, do we need to define all that, or, do we let, the community kind of take care of that and just focus on terms?
You're talking about the required terms for like the safety guidelines. So the question would be, you'd have to go through the safety guidelines and see what objects are called out there
Okay,
and
so let me pull that up
make
real
sure they're
quick.
all in this. But so this is a simple diagram. So if you can imagine a triangle on a whiteboard, I'll draw it for you. And on the top of like I'm just gonna draw a line through the triangle, right? And on the top, like it's very narrow what I could describe or put into the glossary, but at the bottom is the real wide example, VTX, remote TX, like all
Right,
this.
right.
You walk up to the door, put the key in the door, turn the doorknob, like right. But at the top of the triangle is like the first person view, the OS, like some of these more high level, but you have OSD listed here, right? So that's more of a bottom level. So what you're saying is where do we draw the line, right? So like if we want to define that, I would say in this particular glossary of terms, we would want to be like near the bottom just because the education level of our of our constituents is across the board.
Okay, so a
there could
couple
be
of
people there could honestly be people coming to us that are seriously interested in regulations and want to do the right thing, but they don't know what a VTX means, right?
right.
So like that's not a bad idea to include it. I mean, I think but you're talking about multiple levels all in the same glossary probably. Here's a
Now this
UAS.
one,
There you go.
yeah, this one I was doing for the commercial side and started to expand it for recreational. And there's way more in this secondary UAS glossary than what we need for our purposes here. But a lot of these terms are already there, so we can just cut and paste.
I think that's an old link. Are you sure? Wait, hold on. Let me open that. That's a doc.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, this goes into aerial mapping, photography. It goes into everything.
So you know what you
So
want to do is probably have like an elite recreational guy go through this and wipe it
yes,
of anything that is not needed versus things that are needed.
So I think there's a couple of good things in this larger one. For sure,
Totally.
like accelerometer or ADS-C, which is the proposed tracking method, or what's the word I'm looking for here, um, for our drones, at this point. um, so
There's a
there's
lot
a
more to include. There's also things to include though from the hobbyist perspective,
yep.
from the AMA perspective of like what's an airfoil or like all this other basic stuff that like goes all the way back 80 years, right? Kind of like with this stuff plucked out, I would say a combination.
So a couple of things, I've got the or I had the safety guidelines pulled up, but there's a couple of other ones in there, like the let's see, dang it, I just had it up.
WOT, WDR, VTOL. I mean, these are all like things that probably should be included.
So a couple of the ones from the safety guidelines would be like NOTAMs, TFRs, RF. Let's see.
So
What
then do
else is
these
in
spider
here?
webs, so like we go look these up though in the greater, like so you look up some of those and you may need definitions of other things to define those.
Let's see.
It looks like we have it all here though. We just need a lot of work and just parsing it out, combining it, and then there's a lot of information here.
Yeah, there is.
Holy
yeah,
shit.
and well, I've been working on it for quite a while. Yeah, and I've got time to do that probably tomorrow. Just cut and paste over.
Yeah, that's what we would
It,
end up
it'll,
doing. We'd identify useful ones out of this that are useful to us.
so what I'll do is cut and paste the useful segments of that onto the working doc that I started, and then Cujo can use whatever he wants just by plucking off of whatever I come up with.
Now, do you
Yeah.
guys want to do our initial FAQ and safety guidelines language like very dry and technical, or do we want to reflect the constituency at all, even at like the root level?
I mean, for
I
me
think.
personally, I would go with the FAQ. I think that should really be as cut and dry as we possibly can. I mean, we can change it up and give it some flair, but it should just be a simple question answer. What happens when I do this, or can I do this, or kind of like we have it already, just straight and to the point, so that it's easily read, easily understood. But I think with other things that we do, whether it be um, even the glossary, we can take a little bit of uh,
Well, I'm
license with
mostly speaking about language. I guess I really
right.
because when we're talking about a glossary, we really are talking about defining the language. And so if we want to speak to our constituents, should we not use the language they understand?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. Absolutely. So, I mean, I guess my big question is right now with the glossary, do we agree with everything that's here? Do we need to modify, any of these? Do we feel like it's not descriptive enough, or do we feel like it needs enhancing in any way?
I think it's a range, right? If you take like beyond visual line of sight as the top item, right? This is a concept. This is a very high level description of something. And then
Mm-hmm.
you scroll down to item 4, you're talking OSD, on screen display. You're very, very specific technical item, right? So we have a
Mm-hmm.
good range already represented. I would use those two items as like a limit and try to stay within bounds of those for now. Like if
Okay.
you stray from that, then it's going to get really complex. But that's already and granted, that's a broad range, right? You're talking about a
Mm-hmm.
concept versus a specific technical item. That's already like a lot of freedom of scope. Right?
Hmm.
I think that would cover it. I think if we start going out of bounds of that, then we're starting to get a little heady, or too technical.
Okay. So, I know you had sparked off a Facebook kind of uh, question on how to define FPV. Now, what you took from that, and I read through most of it, but what you took from that, do we want to define first person FPV as something beyond just the basic here?
I think that the first or the second item here that's listed, FPV defined as use of an onboard camera to navigate an aircraft. The word navigate then it really comes into question, right? That needs to be better
Hmm.
defined or in their language. So then that's my first question, right? What does that mean? What does it mean to navigate something? Does that mean I can sense and avoid other dynamic objects or only static objects? Does that mean that what does that mean, right? Legally and so on and so forth, or within a competency test, per like possibly. Obviously, this is
Okay.
going to be like not autonomous, right? The capability may or may not be the sole means of navigation. I don't think we need to include that because as recreational FPV pilots, we're not necessarily focused on or considering robots. We're not robots, right?
Would it be wrong to change the word navigate into pilot?
Pilot is a good term too, but it also rubs all the full scale pilots wrong. They all think, look at the UAS guys thinking they're pilots when we are, right? We're sharing the airspace. So it's a little overzealous. It's bold. I mean, it's something to consider. I mean, do we want to be bold?
I think it's the appropriate term.
I thought they were considered operators.
It depends on who you are. If you can crash into a bunch of people on an airplane, are you a pilot?
Yeah, and the FAA in a lot of cases state, for example, here's proposed that the operator of a small UAS must be capable of maintaining visual line of sight. So they're calling it operator. Now I'm only referring to 107 here because that's what I've got in front of me.
And what do operators primarily do? I mean, we could
They
throw
control
in
the
operate
aircraft.
an aircraft, right? So, nah, I don't know. Does it sound good?
They're using it as operator of the controls, and they even state it to that extent in some references. Let me see what they've got in section 349 for us.
I'm with you on the navigator too. I mean, I remember the 1980s. I love it, but like, I guess operator of controls would be more of a pilot.
Yeah, in some cases it's pilot/operator. I'm trying to remember where I picked that one up.
That's not a bad idea either if we want our definition to encompass the line of sight spot, who could be considered an operator at the time. So then some variations of the law could define two operators of the aircraft, one being, licensed and one not, or whatnot.
Right.
Yeah, I see it there. That's the legal definition, right? The highlight.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay.
I just don't see the word navigate falling on our community very well. It's not going to
Well,
be defined very well with them already.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I mean, I with the exception of maybe long range flyers, I mean, there's not a whole lot,
Okay.
or with the exception of maybe even commercial flyers, But as far as recreational pilots, I mean, the best you could probably hope for is navigating a racetrack. I mean, as far as that,
Yeah, no, that's making sense. That's making sense.
Most of
I'm
us,
trying to
Using
think
onboard.
from their perspective, like, what does that word bring to mind? What will it define for them? How will it steer them?
I mean,
navigating uncharted territory.
Oh, there you go.
I mean,
Well, I think a
the
flight of the
biggest term.
navigator, where he
Yeah, I
doesn't know
know.
the controls and he jumps in and he's in the most powerful aircraft ever, and that's like what we do. It's awesome, but like, maybe that's not the best thing we should.
I mean, the biggest term that I can think of, and it's kind of overhyped, but at the same time, I mean, it's almost like flow. I don't know if that's airflow or whatever, but I mean, I know as a freestyle pilot, it's just finding the flow. So, but what does that really mean to anything? I don't know that navigation is the right term, but what is the right term?
Operate an aircraft or use of an onboard camera to orient the aircraft or assist in control of the aircraft.
I kind of have to say that we fly them,
Yeah.
because the difference between us and any GPS
Yeah.
operator,
Okay.
guider, or
What
whatever
about
is that we actually fly them. I mean,
We're
we
not
physically
actually
feel the
using
air.
we're not using navigation. Right. We're steering, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
what about engage in flight of the aircraft?
Driver is a word, because driver implies that the thing would crash without them.
All right. So beyond
Yeah,
visual line of
I like
sight.
fly.
I mean, okay.
Okay.
Flight works. Let's see. What about beyond visual line of sight? Let's kind of break that one down.
Okay.
So, I mean, we've got a very high level
We can't
definition
there's
here.
no wiggle room on it. It's been defined through three major actions that I've been witness to throughout
Okay.
time, and it really hasn't changed other than that. It's only gained like some clarification. It hasn't really changed on overall premise. It hasn't changed from, like, can physically see it, make out anything, control it, none of that.
Okay.
So then we should leave it. I mean, if they want to define it, then we should hold them to that definition. We should draw lines around it, know exactly where it lies, define everything outside.
I think
The FAA's reasoning for that is to just maintain visual line of sight, is because they don't want to get into specific distances or
Exactly.
right, and I do know they
or
allow.
confuse it. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say they do allow, the FAA and their definitions, the even for line of sight, they allow you can lose that visual line of sight briefly if you're looking down at, say, a screen or as you go behind an object.
Oh,
So
so they
obviously,
call out we were talking about that last week. That's really interesting.
well, I saw that in, I think it was under the spotter definition, and I think I just read that. It specifies that it's understood that you will not maintain 100% visual line of sight, that there are times that you will lose that. But
Correct.
you
So
always
there's
know
Page
where it
room for
is.
subjectivity on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's got this
Page
at the bottom of the
131.
glossary.
Yeah. And it goes even further, beginning on page 131 of that Part 107 document.
But
Yeah, that's
what's
what I was looking
interesting
at.
about this definition of beyond visual line of sight is it says nothing about retainment of control of the aircraft, right? It is not. It
Correct.
is not. It is not subject to that. So that's
Yeah,
okay.
that's because
That's perfectly
one of
fine.
their primary concerns is aircraft avoidance of other aircraft. That's why they were keeping the visual line of sight terminology, as far as just the definition, as simplistic as possible.
So it could be
So
used
it's a
in multiple ways.
yes.
Got it.
So if you
Understood.
want to define other parameters, you can put it under the operation.
Well, it makes sense because not everybody is operating their aircraft from the same perspective.
Right.
So then we get to the operation part, though, which is where we clearly cut out what we're talking about, which is good. Well, I guess we should okay. So FPV, first person vision, is this something that is going to be required? Where is this called out in any safety guide?
Okay.
I guess I'm questioning the validity of its existence.
Ah, okay. I'll have that for you in a moment.
I bet you do. It exists for something, right? I'm just curious
Well,
why, because
here
that's
we go.
important.
This is the FAA Reorganization Act annotated. It doesn't matter which one it is, but it on that document on page 283, mid-page, it formalizes a spotter. It says aircraft is flown within the visual line of sight of the person operating the aircraft or a visual observer co-located in direct communication with the operator.
So what you're doing is defining an object here that is shared between the pilot and the visual observer.
Well, no, it states or. So if the pilot or operator is flying line of sight, you don't need the visual observer. But once you put the goggles on, you do.
Got
That's
it.
why
But no, but what you're saying is like one of those two people has to have. But why are we defining first person view vision? Just to say that just as an alternative to line of
let's see. I think I just threw that one in there because it was brought up last week as far as we needed a explanation of it. But I think you were looking for more of an artistic view of it for
the
marketing.
operation kind of does that, but let's leave this just in case it's needed for other things.
Okay, so at this point, do not define first-person vision or FPV here.
Well, it kind of is in the fact that we've covered it in operation, but I'm just thinking
Oh
about the
yeah,
mechanics of the law. Like which part of the regulations requires the mechanics of us to define the vision itself. And I think I kind of see it in the fact that the spotter provides it. An alternative to it or that's what you could do basically. You could use the spotter as somebody who provides everything but that.
yes. Okay. Okay, so, yeah, so we can leave that one out since it's not exactly a
It's possible
FAA
we can
legal
leave it
term.
out. I would leave it in until we know like 100% sure we don't.
Okay.
You might need a spotter's definition. Well, or never mind. We'll get to that. I haven't got.
Yeah, I just made the reference CVO.
All right, so let's do this aircraft operation one because that's the one I'm really interested in.
Okay.
So, like Cujo, do you understand this? Would you be able to transpose it?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a good read on it. It's not that difficult at all. And we can get it into layman's terms pretty easily. It's not that big of a deal.
Are we drawing too many commas here? Like too many items in one sentence that should be pulled out into bullet points? This whole definition should be bullet points after I've got four.
So you're talking about attitude, location, relative altitude,
Correct.
and direction of flight. I mean, I think, yeah, we probably need to pull those out and maybe break them down a little further, but we can easily do that. That's not, I mean, as part of more build on the glossary, so that everybody understands what that means.
What I'm saying is though is like first person vision aircraft operation. It's almost like I need a list of I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of comments or concepts coming at the new guy all at one time.
Yeah,
Right.
What do you guys say about? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I that's what I view it as. It's like 5 comments or whatever, 3 at least.
Okay.
I mean, I think some of it is we can change some of that is like attitude is direction, location. I mean, that's pretty simple. Altitude is height. We can break that down into easily understood terms. As opposed to sticking with aviation specific terms. That way, it's easier to understand. Is that where you're kind of coming from?
I like it.
Okay.
And also the title of this item. I mean, what would we this is sort of up in the air because we are inventing this, right?
So first person view
Yep.
flight, as opposed to aircraft operation, or let's see.
You might want to throw the word remote in this term in its title. Remote first person view operation. Because we need to be sort of specific in the grander scheme of things. We can't have no parachutist come along and take it and say, "Oh, I'm a first person aircraft operator."
Hey, be careful now.
No, it makes sense though because it'd be remote first person aircraft pilot.
Fail. All right. So remote first person. Do we want to, let's see. We change this to remote first person view aircraft operation.
If this is becoming an acronym, we need less words.
What do you mean becoming an acronym?
if this becomes a common acronym within our mechanics, then we need to have less words. So
Okay.
it's less letters. I mean, so like we would say remote first person view flying, remote person view operation. I mean, I don't know if we need to have the whole just as concise as possible. We need some sort of object to define this so that we people know what we're talking about in the future. I mean, this was one of those items where we queried the community and they all said this. They all said this. Like this is the biggest one that they're interested in. So I think that we'll be using it a lot.
So, I mean, the simplest is, remote first person view flight. I mean,
There you go. I mean, there you go. You're flying a B-52 laden with bombs in World War II into a target, or you're flying a drone, target drone, or you're doing an FPV, or you're doing this or that. There you go. It's everything. It's like
or even
every kind
abbreviate
of
it to FPV.
recreational.
Once we get FPV defined and it becomes a common term, perhaps in this glossary, we can just switch it to FPV later on. And
absolutely. I mean, we can use remote in the definition as opposed to the actual term itself.
Yes.
Um,
Well, hey, there you go. You just, dude, you just said it. You just said all the shit that should float from this item right up to the item right above. No, the glossary term right above it. First person view. FPV. Remote control of, we haven't defined that entire. We could take a bunch and put it up.
yes.
Got it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, consolidation.
all right. That looks a little bit better.
Yeah, and even drop the second sentence,
There you go.
perhaps.
Now we're talking.
Actually, you know what? Let me do this. Can I do a strike through on here? Actually, let's just do this. All right, so that's a win there.
I like that.
Me
So
too.
what's his blue stuff? Engage in flight of what does navigate mean? Pilot change. Okay. Using an onboard camera to navigate the aircraft, the pilot or operator is able to determine the unmanned aircraft's altitude, direction, which could be all kinds of shit. Oh my god. Whoa, what a can of worms. Location, relative altitude, height, and direction of flight redundant. Whoa, man. You're getting into azimuth and elevation over here. I don't know.
So I think, I mean, on-screen display, I think we can bring that a little simpler. I think overlays flight information onto your video feed. Fantastic. It allows you to monitor your UAV status in real time while flying. And
Use examples because those
so
items are
yeah, and
never
that's where I
listed.
was about to go to is, we could say similar to a full scale aircraft HUD, I mean, and
It
just
allows you to view your
Oh, yeah.
telemetry in real time while flying FPV. Don't even bother with depending on sensors installed and just wipe all that out and say, for example, RSSI, flight modes, GPS, so on. In real time,
Yeah,
just wipe that
if
out.
you even want to describe what type of telemetry you're looking for. Yeah, I like cleaning it up. That looks good.
Yeah, well, we're gonna end up defining telemetry. That's just the way it is.
well, I mean,
Okay.
that's a definite, term that everybody's using. So let's see. So I'm gonna wipe all that out real quick, depending, and where's my? Oh, it was hidden under. Let's see
Oh wow, this thing has a chat on it. You can chat on the document even. Wow.
my. Simple.
Mm-hmm.
I like simple. That's good. That's simple and short and concise is gonna work.
All right. One of the changes I made, and I did it after we were kind of done talking about it, was back up on the FPV. I said use of an onboard live video camera system to remotely control an aircraft, because it's not just a camera. It is an
Yeah.
entire system. Thoughts?
It's more
No, it's
descriptive.
true
I like
because
it.
the ground station. Yeah, it's all that's what we.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, spotter, we're probably going to need to define that a whole heck of a lot more.
So what is the? I don't even want to. No, just don't even. In this case, I don't want to consider anything that's come before. I think that the definition of a spotter from an FPV pilot's perspective should come from an FPV pilot's perspective. So, whatever's been written on this subject, just forget it. Like, just
Okay.
wipe your brain and then come at it from. I don't know. I know there's a lot of people out there who fly FPV a solo forever and they don't have any friends and they've never flown with anybody. But there's also a lot of people who've flown with small groups, large groups, medium groups, whatever. And so they may have a lot of experience on this. This is something we want to crowdsource the community and ask them what are, and I think we did that a little bit. I asked for some like funny stories and stuff. And there's kind of a theme, right? They're useful. They are useful, but how are they useful? What do we want them primarily for? What do we use them for? Like, not, I don't want to define the spotter as something. I don't want to define a spotter as something that's a nice to have or a wish. This is something that I want to define as reality. Like, what are they? Because I
mean,
use them, and many people do. And what do we what do we rely on them for?
I mean, me personally, I don't fly in large groups. If I fly, it's usually me and like one friend or two friends. But the general gist of what we do is, number one, keep a lookout for people entering the area. I mean, that's my biggest thing, because I fly a lot of parks. I mean, I live in the middle of
So
Phoenix,
stuff on the
Arizona,
ground.
so stuff on the ground.
We have two lines, right? There's things on the ground and things in the air, right off the
Right.
bat. There you go.
Right.
So,
Did you
but
guys
that's
take a look at
true.
Visual Observer?
To me, if I can interject, to me, it's the safety of persons, property, or aircraft.
Yep.
It's true. No, that's entirely true. There you go. It's all of the above for everybody there.
Say that again for me.
The safety of persons, property, and aircraft.
Boom. I mean,
Someone to make sure you push the play button on the GoPro. Sorry, just kidding.
There you go. Hey,
Yeah.
sometimes it's necessary.
Not really.
This is where the solo pilots ask anybody coming over who says, "What are you doing?" Hey, you're my spotter.
Right.
There you go.
Yep.
Hey,
They
it
don't
looks
need
like you're
training.
concerned for the safety of the person's property and aircraft in the area. Would you like to be my spotter?
Yeah, there you go.
My wife was spotting for me one time, and somebody had a vicious dog, and she said, "Don't land. Your quad's gonna be toast."
That's funny. I mean, that's the ultimate of it. I mean, for the most part, it's like, hey, watch my gear while I do this. It's almost like a watch my beer kind of moment. But
my worst moments are when my antenna is pointed. I usually fly diversity, so I have one directional and one omni, and I've always got my directional pointed where I think I'm going to fly, and then I end up getting out there and like having a whole lot of fun and going the other way. So I'm like, hey James, like grab my antenna, bro, and point it the other way because I'm flying here, right? So like spotters have turned out for me to be like ground engineers at times,
Right.
plugging something in I kicked, or changing out a battery on my ground station, or doing all of these other things that keep the aircraft in the air are so important. Like it's not just like watching the aircraft, it's all the other things.
I think you had said lookout in the past, and that's pretty appropriate.
No, that there you go. They're like your hootie hoo lookout. They're like, hey, there's a dog, there's a person, there's a bike
Hmm.
crossing your flight path, there's a whatever. Most of the time, the last thing I want my spotter to be doing is watching my aircraft fly around, because I'll say to them, dude, know where it is. I'm flying it. Shut up. Could you worry about all the other shit that's like I can't see, right?
I mean, one of the big, I think, lookout, making it known what's happening in the immediate vicinity of the operation. I mean, or the flight, or whatever we want to call that.
Well, yeah,
Aircraft operating area.
Excellent.
defining the airspace that we operate within is not a bad idea. I don't know what kind of terms we use for it, fly spots, or if we want to get more technical and talk about, our bubbles or our operations, but we should talk about that. Maybe have that defined, because our FPV operations are somewhat defined when we talk about um like short range FPV versus medium range FPV versus long range FPV. And I talk about that with like my crew of like 8, 12 guys. They know exactly what I'm talking about, like sort of in subjective distances or penetration. So like maybe we should
Hmm.
define those things too so people know. Like if I'm talking short range FPV, I'm talking like an FPV or an AMA airfield. If I'm talking medium range, I might be talking double that, right? In distance. But then long range could be anywhere from, 2 miles to, I'm not gonna get into specifics, but people go much farther. But like they reach the limit of visual line of sight. So there's three definitive like bubbles of operation that we sort of kind of go within, that we talk about regularly. I kind of operate in the short and medium range personally.
Yeah, I think most FPV flights, live in that area. It's a special select few that are really going to the long range. I mean, the furthest I've flown is probably a mile.
But what's interesting about FPV range is, as it's more defined by our limitations of RF environment than
Yeah, absolutely.
not than visual. So our safety margin is dependent upon the safety margin provided by the RF equipment that we're using.
Hmm.
So if we want to retain operations, at these different ranges, like we need to kind of be bold about stating that. Like it's not important that we see the aircraft. It's important that our RF does. You know what I mean?
Right.
Hmm.
So maybe
And
we
I
could
mean,
do that somewhere in the definitions of the ranges. We could be kind of bold. And
I mean, without going into like crossfire territory or anything like that, I mean, most of our range of our RF equipment is dictated by visual line of sight. I mean, you go behind a patch of trees, you're gonna get some static in your goggles, if not lose connection, depending on what you're flying and the density of what you're doing. But
Hmm.
um,
but
even
that's not
even
what people are doing. We're flying 433. We're flying 900. We're flying 1.3. We're flying 2.4. We're flying 5.8. We're flying 2.3. We're flying there's dude, believe me, I know. And I'm going to be honest about it all.
right,
We fly far. I mean,
yeah,
I was just out the other day with guys, and we were flying, you know, they, they'll fly 10 miles easy, like in a breath, right? With precision and with safety in mind, and with, all the airspace, called the towers, everything, right? These guys know what they're doing, but there's a whole nother level. So it really should be defined. because the RF limitations at each one of these levels is like what you're saying, right?
It's
You're
completely
saying, hey,
different. Yeah.
the short and the medium range guys, they really are limited to line of sight. The long range guys, they're not,
No.
right? But they're using a whole they're in a different definition, right? And we
Right.
can write that out, and we can figure that out.
Okay.
So then, quick question: when we talk about line of sight, or visual line of sight? Does that include, like, say, flying in an abandoned building where you physically can't necessarily see it? You can hear it, so to speak. But if it wasn't for the obstruction, it would clearly be within line of sight,
I
visual.
would have to go all the way back. So this is why the invention of the first person view flight
Right.
object is important, because that kind of transcends or circumvents all of those other English words you may use. But what he's doing is using an onboard live video camera to navigate the aircraft. Pilot or operator is determined the unmanned aircraft's altitude, location, relative altitude, and direction of flight. Right? He's retained that ability of control, even though he's lost visual line of sight. So what
Yeah.
we kind of propose to say is that that's more important, that the pilot has retained that
Yeah.
dominance and
Absolutely.
control over a spotter having visual line of sight. So
Oh, good.
you're
That's
right.
what
You're
I
right.
agree.
There's nuance in there, right? So like
Yep.
later down the line, when you write the narrative around this glossary, you can definitely include that fact.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. All right. Good.
There you go. So this, what we hope to gain from this glossary is the objects or the language that recreational FPV pilots want to use.
Yep.
And you just
Also,
defined it for me, man. You just said something that like we want to say, right? So is it safe for me to fly in that window over there of the abandoned building and down the staircase and out another building? Yeah, it is,
Hmm.
because I have retained first person view flight of that aircraft the entire time.
Yes.
and to carry that further, once you enter the building, you're no longer in the national airspace, and the FAA has no control over you.
Oh,
Oh,
whatever, you legal.
yeah.
Your lawyers are gonna hate you. No, but that's
Hey, I
true
did
as
a photo
well.
shoot.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But when you get into the
Well,
sticking points, is it really safe? Let's use common sense. He has to retain control of that aircraft throughout that operation, or else it's not a safe operation.
right.
Especially if there's a
And
bunch
you're
of
still
public and they're
responsible.
not. Yeah, and you're
Hmm.
yes, there.
Yeah, so we probably don't want to bring up abandoned buildings because that's a trespass issue. So then start talking about, the
It's a different issue.
forested
Hey, it's out of
forested
scope.
areas.
We're only
Yeah,
talking
it's out of
airspace.
scope. Right, right. So like forested
I like
areas
it.
where the canopy is impeding your visual.
No, we're assuming you took off down the road. That's what we're doing. It's all
There
good.
we go.
That's it. Okay. Out of scope. I like it.
We can always draw out of scope. That's easy because we have a very narrow mandate.
Okay.
So what goes next to on-screen display? Instead of digging into the weeds on each one of these items, I really want to have a better idea of the cross section of items that will be next to it. Does that make sense? Like I think this list needs to mature in breadth before it gets into the details.
I would agree because there's certain, on a side note on that topic is there's certain levels of assisted sight, meaning gyro, satellite, so on and so forth. And I don't know, we want to go into that level of detail right now.
We can drag it all in, and these guys will. I mean, well, I'll wake up tomorrow and they'll have it all in there. But like where do we want to draw the line? Like, do we want to describe the microchips on the eyes of the cameras, or do we want to talk
I'm
about just
talking
the
about
camera?
like gyro assisted versus accelerometer assisted versus GPS assisted, that kind of thing.
That is not a bad idea. So you're talking about IMU versus GPS guidance.
Yeah, and then because they've mentioned it numerous times in the regs, the
I did not see.
avoidance, then you got to start talking about cameras specifically for object avoidance, but we don't really. I don't know. To me, that would be out of scope. But definitely, the level of assisted flight electronically, I think, is something we could at least get into a little bit.
That is good. Well, we have no mention of it at all. We all assume that we fly the aircraft via manual method, or in fixed wing we fly via manual method as well. But there's lots of gray area. There's like probably 30 or 40% of our populations that use stabilization of some kind, or return to home and these kinds of things.
Well, right, and that all does add to the safety
But
of
if
the
if
flight.
I if I went out there right now and I tried to combine the communities of whatever it's called on Facebook, the DGI official user group, right, of Phantoms, which has like 50,000 users, right? If I tried to combine that with the manual FPV guys, who are a much smaller number,
Well,
and
that's
then
completely
I took a
different.
poll about what these definitions are, they would be highly skewed.
Yep, absolutely.
So do we want the data? Like, where do we want the data from on this?
Personally, I think we should just keep it to FPV community.
There you go. So if we just ask the FPV community, then we could say gyros, accelerometers, GPSs, and autonomous flight is completely out of scope, because they all seek actual immersion in the flight experiences.
Right.
So we are only simply defining these things as to call them out as what we don't do.
Well, they do. I guess it would be part of the beyond visual line of sight, potentially. I don't
Well,
know.
so
Yeah.
we should define them as objects, so that if we refer to them and call them out later, then they're at least.
So if you're using a flight controller at all, you're being assisted in some way or another.
Right.
Which comes
Exactly.
out of our definition of first person view flight. Yes.
Yeah, then it's probably best to just leave that out of scope for now. Then. Yep.
So yeah, what the point of the first person view flight item, which is number 3, is to omit those items, like specifically, I think. But if we need to call them out as well, that so that we know what people are, so that everybody, the audience of this document, realizes what we are admitting from first person view flight, then that's a great idea.
Well, I
It's
mean,
up to you guys. What do you think?
I mean, personally, I think it's two different things. It's completely separate. So,
Yeah, I think
I
so
mean,
too.
one, you have a control method, which would be your gyros, your accelerometers, and whatnot. But the other one is the difference between how you're flying the craft, whether you're using your Mark 1 eyeball or if you're using a camera system. I mean, it's not. It's two separate things. It's technology,
So for
and
our
two different
purposes, though, you
outputs.
only see 2 things. We don't have to identify all the things.
I kind of agree because when you look at like FPV wing, in most cases you do not have like a flight controller. So yeah, and that's just kind of a separate, like you were saying before, methodology of operation.
I consider multi-rotor flight, even with a flight controller in manual mode, I consider that aerodynamic flight.
Yeah,
And only for this reason, because I've done it and it's hard as shit. And that the guys who do it, they're actually like flowing in the air, right? They're
right,
using the air. They're not using anything else. The controller is only a coordination of their inputs. It's not
right.
necessarily a coordination of the gravity in the air itself, like a flight controller would normally do.
I mean,
I'll
it's
let them get
just.
away with it, if only in manual.
I mean, I fly freestyle multi-rotors all day long, but I think you're just the difference between using a flight controller and not using a flight controller has no bearing on how you are actually viewing the flight of the craft, and
Yeah,
that's a
I
full
agree.
stop right there. I think, if we want to define those things later on, fantastic, but it has absolutely no bearing on FPV or line of sight.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of just went off on a tangent and then realized that was a tangent. And
That's all right. I mean, it's something we can define, but it's something that's irrelevant to that specific, topic, I think.
Should we still include topics like GPS, accelerometer in the
Absolutely.
glossary?
I mean,
Okay.
I think we should, because I mean, for one, I use a GPS to calculate speed. I
Okay.
mean, I've got a 200 mile an hour multi-rotor that you can't tell how fast it's flying without a GPS data, in a black box download.
Wow. Right. Right.
So,
And the terms will be popping up, so a newbie will be curious as to what it is.
absolutely, and I think it's going to be something that's going to be in the future. It's going to be in the regulations. They're going to require some method of communication or tracking or anything like that, and GPS is going to be one of those big things, those big terms that pop out, I think.
Right.
So
Okay.
along with this glossary, we're getting into a lot of elementary type terms. Excuse the term, but should we not employ like some of the community that have already written out guides and FPV, how to do's and glossaries already? Like they have all this stuff, right? We can just go out there and copy and paste it from their websites.
That's called plagiarism, and we can't do that.
Well, no. I say that we just go and they hear us now, and I mean, there's people out there. I think I saw like Steele even had a like FPV Bible thing on his website.
oh,
Like
the
all
ethics
the
website. Yep.
there's so many of them out there. I mean, just to give one example, but let's get these guys to contribute to us and throw their content toward the coalition and get it included, or at least polished up or repurposed for our uses, so that it goes in here and spreads the word.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, and perhaps motivate them to get involved as well.
I'm just trying to think, why reinvent the wheel? Because there's probably a lot of people listening going, "Hey, I already did that," right? So
Hmm.
yeah, let us have your stuff. Let's use it.
All right.
Then we don't have to dive into this whole, what's an OSD. We could just get up to the more important stuff that we want to define for our safety.
Yeah, I think personally for this, I think we need to just stick to the legislative stuff, and either we can create or somebody can create, the basics, the basics guide.
Contribute, please
Right.
contribute items.
So,
Okay. Gotcha.
let's focus on those things that impact the ability to fly, as far as regulations, and kind of draw the scope line there. And that's our line in the sand. That's what we're going to focus on, because if you don't do these things, or you're doing these things incorrectly, that's going to inhibit your flight or open yourself up to litigation, or any of the bad words that we don't want to hear.
Well, I think we've got it here. You've got the main items. I mean, this is a good straw man because you've captured the two major items that we needed called out. But like, we need to work on them now, polish them, and then the rest of the stuff, let's just get it pasted in. 507 can get something started on the website to make this more presentable, next to the safety guidelines.
So a couple of terms that I think need to be on here would be, the NOTAM, notice to airmen, and the temporary flight restrictions, because those are going to be key to keeping our pilots, flying in the right. And I think, let's see what else. A couple other ones, like definition of a nautical mile. These are some of the ones I'm coming up. RF. I'm just reading through the guidelines here.
UAS.
What about like
SUAS.
Hamden, or do we not want to go down that road?
I think for right now, let's just focus on FAA stuff, because that's the hot topic right now.
But yes,
Right,
we
but I
should
it is
mean,
going to
include it.
be.
FPV
It is going
does,
to.
No, we
especially
should
from
include it.
a legal perspective. I mean, that's kind of an elephant, the whole
No,
ham
I
thing.
consider it a concern of FPV pilots. So
Yep.
if it's a concern of FPV pilots, then it needs to be included in it, and it should
Okay.
be. But we have some guys, like I have some ham resources and stuff, and we have a lot of them. So we'll get into that. But like the FAA coming down on us has been the biggest subject, like he says.
Right. Um,
One of the things regarding safety and flying within the regulations that has concerned me a little bit, and most of our flight controllers can't grasp what our altitude is. Um, are we going to be following the 400-foot ceiling of AGL from the point of origin, or and how does pilots know that without the use of like a barometer or some type of altimeter in their telemetry?
I mean that. If you, I guess the gist of that one is it's going to be, if you, I guess the advice that I would give to any member of the coalition or any FPV pilot, that is, to if you're going to be flying at those heights, then you need to take proper precautions to know what your altitude is. I mean, like I have a Radix that's got a barometer built into it, but that's the only flight controller I have that tells me what height I'm at, but it's built onto the quad that I'm most likely to take to those levels.
Right.
I
I
honestly
I mean,
do.
my concern was flying over some sort of ravine or canyon, or out where you're in out in nature, and you're more apt to have radical elevation changes, and what the law is going to consist of and what you're going to have to abide by.
It's gonna get sticky out there.
I
400 feet
mean,
is not a lot of window. You're right. If you're taking off on a cliff or something, you could do it quick. But
yeah, it's
it's
like,
like
I mean,
anything. It's you got to use common sense. You know.
I'm going up
Why
to
would
the
you not
Grand
want to
Canyon.
fly down the cliff anyway? I mean,
I'm
that's what
going.
I
I'm
would do.
going up to the Grand Canyon in 2 weeks. And if I took off at the ledge, I'd instantly be a mile high. Like,
Well, you also couldn't fly there
no,
anywhere near anywhere
I
on
know.
it
I'm just.
because
It's
it's
an
totally.
example, Sean.
That's a great way to get a headline, dude.
Yeah, well, not that I'm in danger of doing it. I'm just using it as an example.
I saw. You know what's funny is I saw FPV flights over Shiprock recently, and I've been eyeing Shiprock for over 10 years as a climbing destination, and not doing it because the Indians in the area like don't want you to. So like I'm like, okay, cool, I won't go climb it. And then here's these FPV guys out there just like diving the thing. I'm like, I hate you.
Yeah, for real. I mean, I'm going all over Northern Arizona in a couple of weeks, and like I wanted to go fly at Monument Valley, and I pulled it up, and it's like tribal land. Nope, can't fly
Yeah,
there.
don't bother. Don't even bother.
No, I mean, if there's anything I'm gonna do, it's respect that. But it's frustrating sometimes because you've got all these amazing places, and it's just like, nope.
All right, so where are we at on this thing?
All right,
We gotta
so
add a bunch of items, shorten anything that's on here into like one or two sentences.
okay,
So
well,
imagine we're talking to third graders that are like FPV pilots that just want to fly.
Can do. I mean, that's what we did for the FAQ, and I think that turned out really well. So let's see. I mean, visual line of sight, we can kind of break that down.
I wanted to touch on the safety guidelines tonight. Did we need to go over anything from the last time, or is there anything that we can bring up now that anybody slept on the safety guideline?
I pulled them up. Let me post a link real quick. I know there's somebody else in them, but let's see. Copy link.
All
There's
right,
quite a
cool.
few. There's quite a few notes in here that need to go over. I know G36, you put a couple notes in here today for us to kind of break down.
Yes, please. Let's rid this document of notes. That would be a good place to start. We have some old notes on here that were going on a long time ago, I think. Is this the original document?
Yes, this is the original document, but we resolved all the notes when we covered it the first time. But we need to kind of resolve some of the newer ones.
This is an ugly document, Josh.
Well, it was one of the first ones created, and it's had a bunch of people beat it to death. So of course it's gonna be
So
ugly.
you're saying it's old and it's still ugly.
I'll work on it. Calm your tits.
No, I think this is an important document. I think that we have a lot of information here that we need to just boil down and get concise.
Okay.
So it's one short list so that people understand it.
All
I
right.
mean,
So
we're at that point. If we want to go live with the website and the whole org all at the same time, we should have this at least in a, let's call it a draft 1.0 state. when we
okay.
do that.
So give me a day or so to get this cleaned up, and let's not even look at it right now. Let me clean it up and calm yourself.
It's dirty, huh?
It is dirty. But let me clean it up. Let me get some of the changes from the, because we wrote this before the regulations dropped.
I know.
Right.
So
I think this is my document. So if you need me to send it anywhere, do anything with it,
no,
you
it's
can.
already in the file. So, but let me drop this in and get it cleaned up, and then we can kind of look at it in a couple of days.
Yeah, sorry about that. My document.
I just noticed what the NOTAM actually stands for. We should call ourselves
Yep.
airmen.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
That's such an
We're
old
not
school term.
I see a T-shirt.
Holy cow.
It's funny. All right, so let's move away from that. Just move on.
So yeah, so basically we dropped back a week to take a look at the glossary. But truly, what we were doing was defining the objects to be used in this document. So when we write this document or when you polish this document and you reference anything that you see as a thing, make sure that it's a thing on the glossary too, basically, right?
Yeah. Do
Yep.
we have failsafe in the glossary?
Nope.
That's
There's
an
a bullet
important one.
point.
Hey,
Yeah.
good
There's a
call out.
bullet point in the safety guidelines that talks about failsafe.
I would say that's on par with OSD. It's right on that. It's right on that line there, Coach.
Yep.
Well, I don't know.
Highest level is that conceptual, regaining control of something, whatever.
I would say we don't need necessarily OSD to fly, but we absolutely need to have failsafe.
Correct. Well, no, failsafe is actually used by the regulations several times as an object within the regulations. So we should define it as well in parallel with them in our language. No, I saw failsafe listed several times when G36 was doing the interpretation.
Yep. All right. Well, I'll get this cleaned up, and then I will key in terms from this over to the glossary, and then G36 and I can get those defined and get that cleaned up, and then they can just function in parallel. I mean, honestly, you could put the safety guidelines on the website and then drop the glossary right beneath it.
That's exactly. You read my mind, dude.
So,
Okay.
all right. So
Do we
I'll
have
clean this
to
up,
Yeah.
and
about
we'll
that?
wrap up the
Because
glossary.
What
that
are
sounds
they
like a week's worth.
considering for like the glossary? Should we consider safe operating distance as a thing?
Yes, correct. Yes, we should. We've already been talking about that one for months.
Oh,
Actually,
okay.
it should be called out.
Sorry, I think I missed that.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's perfectly fine.
It's the
Because
one
safe
that's been
operating
hashed out the
distance for
most.
FPV is
Oh,
yeah.
gotcha.
That's the one that we dived into early because I knew it would be contentious, and we don't even have it here. Wow.
So, all right. So, anything else we need to cover, Sean?
Other than we're waiting on Chad to come back from his convention, we'll see what happens.
Okay. So, I know last week we had gotten the lawyer signed on. I know the next step is to actually form the 501c3. And I mean, you've probably talked to Sean or to Chad more than I have, but in terms of where we are, I think we're in a good spot. And I mean, 5.0 has gone leaps and bounds on the website, so it's just kind of putting the final touches on, getting a couple documents updated, and I think we
So
should be.
the one thing is with those slides on the front of it, he should do. I think what is it like the same thing over and over again right now? Just the mission statement. We should do by the time when we have this already, we should have one is the mission statement, whatever. One is the FAQ. One is the safety guidelines. One is something. One is like let's say have like our goal to be like 5 major announcements when we hit that live. You know
Yeah,
what I
we can
mean? So
definitely
that
have
little
different words with
slide,
every
huh?
slideshow up there.
Okay, I get you. So we'd probably just have to edit those into the pictures themselves, right?
Yeah, in that slideshow, each picture you can add different words, and I just put the same words on all of them.
Okay, cool. Fantastic.
But each one can be different. So, like, kind of, we can have 5 major different things go across.
Can you create different links to different areas from those pictures?
Yeah, I think we could do that.
That would be interesting as an addition to the menu that's already there. So if something scrolled up, then boom, it'll take you to that section. So like the mission statement would talk about our story. Like if you clicked on that one, FAQs. I mean, the rest of it's kind of obvious, but yeah, I think that would be a good deal.
Yeah, so Sean, did you want to say anything else about why we're not live with the website yet, or what we're kind of waiting for still, or what Chad might be thinking?
No, I just think that we should just do it all at once. I mean, when we go official and we're allowed to solicit funds and resources and do it all at once, we still got to go through those apps and drill Chad on other resources that we may have, human resources. So I think that human resources and also physical resources, which would be time and money, kind of go hand in hand. And we don't want to like kind of blow our load too early. We want to spend it all at once. So if we can form the coalition at the same exact time that we actually announce it, that would be in line with our value of integrity.
So just as a kind of to-do list in my mind, I'm thinking, website 501c3, donations, ability to accept donations, ability for a membership base, and what that looks like. So, one of the biggest questions on my mind right now is, considering what the FPV coalition is and considering what our goal is, of the people here in the chat, what would be acceptable as a membership and what would you want to see out of that?
Yeah, you started talking about the services that we may provide. Like,
Yeah, not only
member-
that, but what's the value to you? I mean, what if there were a membership fee, what would be the value to you, and what would you want to see returned for that value?
That sounds like a good question for the Facebook group or something.
Any thoughts from anyone here?
To me, I think a good value would be, getting everyone up to speed on what it's going to take to pass your test to be certified to fly recreational FPV.
There you go.
Okay, so
Yeah,
education.
the education part of it. And as a CBO, we might be able to administer the test or create it as well.
Right. I
about
mean,
that.
I'm concerned with that. You know, my daughter, I posted it up in there, and she's been flying the simulator since age 7. Now she's 8, going on 9, and she's flying full manual acro FPV with a multi-rotor.
Great.
And
Mhm.
for her to have that taken away from her, it just kind of stinks.
I'm wondering, if we can, on that kind of topic, can we create the same version of the test or different versions of the test for different age groups?
I just got an item for you for this
Mm,
glossary.
like a junior
Um,
membership.
The safe FPV flight location.
Oh yeah, that would be great. I mean,
That's
kind of
an
like
object we
an
probably
AMA field or whatever, but you know, FPVFC.
All right, so we can definitely post that up in Facebook. See what people think of all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, probably looking for education. If we can administer the test and create one, that would be awesome. And the other would be insurance, like an AMA benefit currently has.
Yeah,
One
absolutely.
thing for new potential members, or even just people that don't want to take the time to look, it'd be nice if the website just had a page that said, "Here are all the links. Here's everything you need to do according to the regulations." So you need to have a link to the registration, and so on and so forth.
We've got that.
Oh, you do already?
Yep,
Okay.
50 is on top of that.
Oh, well, all right. Never mind. I haven't actually seen it, so I don't know yet.
Another thing could be helpful to new people is some sort of build advice, some sort of hotline or connection to
Okay.
experts that could help you with your build and make sure you're doing things that are gonna help you succeed in the future.
Well, maybe that's maybe a membership gets, or for a reduced amount or something. I don't know. Could get you into the Quad Camp Online Discord for build help or something. That's something you'd have to bring up with Kevin and Chad. But I mean,
Yeah.
there are a lot. I know there's Bardwell's, he hangs out there too. I know there's a lot of build help type places, but if we could kind of funnel people to those locations and even provide a discount, that would be helpful.
Yeah, networking with existing stuff is always a great
Yep.
thing. Not everybody knows where to go.
Yeah, and then I would always love to see sponsored events.
Okay. I'm just trying to gauge what people are thinking in terms of, what they'd look for out of the coalition beyond just, the potential lobbying and as an organization, as a CBO, what can we do to aid the community? So insurance, yeah, that's a huge one. So, all right, I was just curious on that. Anybody else have anything?
Not at the moment.
All right, well, I think we'll kind of wrap this up unless anybody's got some last minute stuff. All right, well, have a great night, guys, and I will see you in the chats.
Later, everybody.
Everybody.
Sounds great. Good night.
FPV is awesome.
Great.
That's
awesome. That's great.
Good night there.
Good night, guys.
FPV is awesome.